Hello, friends. It's been a minute, probably, for most of you, but I just wanted to take a minute to continue with sort of like introducing the world that I've been writing and that game I've been making. And hopefully, next year will be the start of my book, right? You just have to start it at some point. This has all just been kind of a playground for the bigger picture, which is a fantasy novel series that I've had in mind for a while. And I've just been fleshing out a lot of the work. Welcome to Runa. It's a world shaped by divine forces. And really, the player of this is the cosmic threads that sort of entangle everything. There's an internal struggle between order, balance, and chaos, and that's sort of the foundation for the like astral playground, as it were. And here myths aren't just stories; they're the building blocks of reality itself. And every action, every choice, every heartbeat is a strand woven into the living tapestry. And so, as a player in this world, or as a storyteller, as I like to call it, you're not just exploring it; you're literally shaping it, which is cool because then the lore master and the players get sort of this ongoing storytelling, story creation process together, which is pretty sweet. So most of the game is designed to be completely improv based. I do a lot of preparation, but then I generally just kind of throw that all out the window and then let the players take me wherever they want to go and just put some, plot points here and there. I have a general idea of where the story should end up, but I never really know until we start playing, which is sort of the fun dynamic of this world. And you know, in this world, you can have a lot of different pathways, a lot of different ways to solve the challenges. And whether you're like a divine touched warrior or a cunning thread weaver or like a renegade explorer, your journey is bound to the same forces that shape existence: the threads of power, celestial alignments, and the encroaching shadow of Vel's Wither, which is kind of the big bad evil that's surrounding the world. Obviously, I'm a big Tolkien fan, and everything's kind of set in the foundations of Sauron and corruption and all those cool things about his world. And this world is more of a nod to it more than anything. Obviously, it's written in a time where this book would be a little bit more progressive. A lot of people in this world are gender fluid in a way. So, and that being as like gender is like a camouflage to some of these specific species, like Myvothians. They don't operate under the same sort of human existence, yet they still are kind of running around in the roles that humans exist in. And so I think it plays for some interesting story dynamic and character creation. And that's just one small flavor of the world. I don't want to go too much into depth of that, and kind of want to just take a quick moment to introduce you to the world a little bit through this video. Runa isn't just like only about adventure, right? It's about consequence. It's about creation. And instead of dice in this world, which most like Pathfinder or D&D are using, every action is drawn through kind of a fate system, really. So characters have a backstory that is all token based. So each character has, depending on their actual size, their literal size of their character, they will have somewhere around 18, 20, or 23 tokens in their bags. And then the lore master also has his own bag. So whenever the characters are acting, there's also a push back from what I call favor. You might think of it as like luck or fate or something like that, but just to not conflict with too many other of the same overlapping terms, I've called it favor. And so the characters can kind of manipulate their own bag, their own draws through like momentum or training, and then they can actually manipulate the lore master's draw too through like divine interaction. So the characters sort of get to have their handprint and everything, and it's interesting. I like the idea that, instead of a wide-ranging 1 through 20 dice roll, you have the way to kind of mitigate things throughout the check. But it's not that easy, right? There's a lot more layers to it. There's fatigue, and there's strain, and there's wounds, right? And those muck up your draws and things you have to mitigate as a character. And there's threads, right? You can take them in, and they're sort of like the magic system of this world, but they're tied to Vel, the chaos, which is the big bad evil, and so there's a risk in using them. So it's not just a free for all when it comes to magic. I think Brandon Sanderson, had a teaching about good magic systems have some consequences, and I've always subscribed to that. And I think this world is definitely rooted in a lot of like risk and reward. And so, like every choice the character make kind of just ripples through the world, and it's up to y'all whether you'll bring harmony or discord, right? And really the foundation of the world is set on the whole notion of balance, right? So not too much of any one thing, right? Too much order or too much chaos. They're bad in their own ways, right? And balance is sort of how you pull the yin and yang together and keep it in a stasis, right? So it doesn't unravel. And really, like when I started thinking about Runa a while back, I created it to explore basically what lies between like myth and memory, right? So between the stories we wish, we wish we could still hear, the stories we tell currently, and it also was just kind of a setting for a fantasy novel. Like I prefaced at the beginning of this video, I started years ago, and it was a story about kind of searching the memories of the dead and to understand sort of who we are and who we've lost. I've dealt with a lot of loss in my life from some close people that I wish I would have known a little bit more, had a little bit more, identity. Really just kind of feel like the identity got a missing link from me, right? So I don't know who like my father was or my grandfather, not to go into some dark details, but these were just things I wish I could have like sort of gone back and had some insight in, and that's how the fantasy novel started, right? It was just kind of like when you lose people too young or before you can understand, and just wishing you could maybe understand who these people were and maybe find some of your own identity through it, right? And it kind of Runa became my way of kind of dealing with that, right? To explore grief and legacy and identity through creation, and to build a world where memory itself is alive, where stories are not forgotten but reborn, right? There's a whole recycling of energy in this world through the divine powers and the mortals that dwell here. And going like way back to my childhood, I grew up surrounded by imagination, right? Like I was in a home filled with National Geographics and maps and the wonders of distant cultures, and I studied them endlessly, and like making my own maps and little fantasy worlds as far as back as I can remember. I think my first computer, when I was like 8 or 9, I got an IBM computer from my uncle, and the first thing I did was wrote a fantasy script just for whatever reason. So I think it's just kind of in my blood to do at this point. It is something that kind of keeps me at peace and keeps me, I think it's a better addiction than any of the other ones I've had in my life. So I'm going to keep it, you know what I mean? So yeah, taking it back to like the whole National Geographics, like as I've gotten older, I've done a lot of travel through wedding photography and just travel in general. And my wife loves to travel. And so being able to kind of explore cultures and then think about them and appreciate them, right? A lot of the cultures in my world are nods to real life cultures and things that I just appreciate about the world that we live in and the people that we interact with, right? So when I began creating Runa, on top of the fantasy novel, I just wanted to honor that, like my childhood, my imagination, just the way I've always thought about the world. And basically like a place where like civilizations rise not through conquest or hierarchy, but through connection, right? Adaptation and the balance between order and chaos. Really, there's like a big bad evil sleeping in the planet underneath everything, and everybody they realize they have to band together to sort of solve this. So they have to set down their conflicts with each other and work together. And I think that's a little bit more interesting than just a constant flow of bloodshed, as some of the other RPG systems and worlds sort of align with, and that being said, like this world, like its threads, its deities, its ever-shifting balance is like meant to remind us that creation is an act of memory, right? Every choice, every story told at the table, every legend carved into the thread of Runa just brings us closer to understanding who we are and what we leave behind, right? So yeah, I guess that's just a little plug for my world, and welcome to Runa. It's a world born from myth and shaped by imagination and carried by memory, and well, hope you join me sometime in it. Have a good one, y'all.